on Wednesday night, we got the release of the SEC slate. Danny, what were the big takeaways from once we finally got to see? Other than Oklahoma getting absolutely hosed, right? And that it was just like Oklahoma, they're regretting everything. I made a big mistake. All of the memes, like this is definitely, you want to go back to the Big 12, right?
Yeah, no doubt. They're definitely going to have an uphill battle, and you're going to hear about it all the time too, how they got screwed over Texas. They definitely did get the harder road for sure. I think the thing is, like, you start looking at some of these matchups and it's all right, the biggest winner is the fans. Like, this is why the deal was made. This is why Greg Sankey had the foresight, say this is direction college football is going. You got marquee matchups. We had talked a little bit about Georgia, Bama facing each other. You could see a similar type situation where you get them 3 times, similar to what could happen with Ohio State, Michigan, end of season. At least this one will be spread out a little bit. So yeah, I thought it was just the general overall excitement about the matchups, given Bama and Georgia, both pretty tough slates. LSU, a little bit of an easier slate of those. There's opportunity in there for some of these teams to make inroads, which if you were trying to follow an NFL mindset, which it's really hard to do without a draft and free agents in a salary cap, it's schedule tougher. I mean, they do that. They give the NFL teams that are coming off Super Bowl and better seasons a tough record. And it sure looks like they've tried to do that, at least early on, with what they've given Georgia and Bama to try to make it harder on them. And it allows some of the teams that are in that second tier to bump up to the first.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I agree. If you look at Oklahoma's schedule for 2024, it is rough. It's much rougher than what they were facing in the Big 12 generally, even when they're, doing the round robin. But like, that's just kind of the way it's going to work now in these 16-team leagues, where you've got it. You're going from leagues where you might have 2 to 3 very good teams to now you're having 2 big leagues that are going to have 4, 5 legit playoff contenders in them every single season. And you're not, now that you've gotten rid of divisions, whether it's the East is the most powerful or the West is the most powerful, you don't get to avoid the other one anymore because you're playing everybody. The divisions are gone. So it's just kind of the new reality for this. When you look at these 16-team leagues and there's no divisions, you're playing everybody. Every year you're going to have a tough schedule. Maybe you don't have to play Georgia this year, but you're going to have to play Alabama and LSU. Maybe you don't have to play Alabama, but you're going to have to play Georgia, and so on. And it's the same thing too. Like when I talked about this before the show, when the Big Ten schedule came out last week, and they've got the 9 games, and I do think the SEC will be going to 9 games by 2025. But when you play that kind of schedule, like everybody in the Big Ten, when they saw their schedules for 2024, 2025, every single fan base was like, oh my God, this schedule is so hard. It's so much harder. Yeah, that is the point. Everybody's schedule is hard now. If you're a good team, you're going to have a hard time. If you're a bad team, you're going to have a hard time. That's kind of the purpose, and it creates great television matchups, which is really what is driving everything now to begin with. So it's an interesting schedule. It's weird because there is that kind of hypocrisy in that, just as a traditionalist, I've never really been a big fan of the realignment. Like, I'm not a big fan of Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC. It's weird to me. But then you see the matchups that you're going to get, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I'll watch that game for sure. Yeah, thank you for doing this for me. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be tough. And with the expansion to the 12-team playoff, kind of like what you're saying, Danny, you don't have to be as afraid to schedule Georgia and Alabama in the regular season, because no matter what, they're probably still going to both make the playoff no matter what happens in that game. So you can afford to take those chances. Whereas you definitely get the feeling when they were doing what they had been doing with the 12, 14-team leagues, when they were both in separate divisions, they were kind of intentionally keeping those 2 away from each other so that way they could maybe get to the title game undefeated. The winner wins the league and the loser still gets to the playoff.
Yeah, the Oklahoma schedule, for those who might not have gotten a chance to see it, they get Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee at home. That is right. Those are only 3 because of the rotation with Texas, where it's a neutral site. Sometimes it's going to count as a home game for you, this being one of those years. Your road games are Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, and Missouri. For my money, that is Oklahoma drawing the top 4 or 4 of the top 5 programs from the SEC West, which has been the tougher side of the division. You don't have a Mississippi State. You don't have an Arkansas. On the east side, you don't have a Vanderbilt. You do have a Missouri, but that is a very, very tough draw for the Sooners and a cold shower welcome to the SEC. Something that, Tom, you just touched on right there, and Danny as well. I saw that, David Ubben at The Athletic, he's a big fan of the show. He wrote a column in reaction to the schedule release that is, discusses kind of what you're talking about, where you are not a fan of realignment, but then you see the schedule and you're like, oh boy, I can't wait for that. You're kicking and screaming as college football is changing, and we're like, it's just run by TV. This is the worst. And now I'm like, I cannot wait to sit at home and watch these games on TV. Like, this is going to be incredible entertainment. This is going to be a competition at the highest level in college football. And like all of the weird, Greg Sankey Premier League kind of talk is like, I don't know. Kind of seems like you've got a Premier League right here. This is super fascinating to actually get a chance to see what the schedules are going to look like, because it is going to be, and man, they've beat us over the head and brainwashed us into talking about the SEC as a meat grinder. But that's a meat grinder, man. Those schedules are tough.
Can we just I want to make sure we don't fall into the trap, which everybody's going to do, which is, these schedules are so brutal, which they are because of historical brands of those helmets.
They are, because there's no floor. Like there isn't that low floor. In most conferences, you can look at as many as 4 teams and be like, that's a week off. That is a week where we at least can feel as though, if you show up with your B- game, you're still going to go and win. And I truly believe that is like the real strength of where the SEC is right now. It might not have always been that way. Sometimes they are propped up by tradition and brands and things like that. But right now, probably because of investment, and it's all a big circle there, I just don't think there's that many times where you can catch your breath.
Yeah, but to Danny's point too, I think what you're getting at is, now we look at Texas and Oklahoma as like, ooh, big teams, like Tennessee, big game. Once this all starts, some of the teams that we look at as the big teams are going to be going 7-5, and it's going to be like, well, we will still, or at least SEC fans will still pretend that 7-5 team is really an 11-win team in any other league.
Well, like Oklahoma, they're saying, oh, this thing is such a gauntlet. Like, it is. You got Bama, which is probably the one that you have to look at and you say, yep, no doubt, tough one. Every other team on there, like Tennessee's coming off a great year, but 3 years ago, it's like, we can win that game. Like, you start chalking up W's 2 years ago to a lot of these programs that Oklahoma's going to face. And like, how do you classify Auburn? Like, yeah, it sounds, Auburn, national. Like, is it? Ole Miss, another one who, limped into the final, finish of this season. Is that a tough one? It might be. Maybe Hugh Freeze is awesome, but maybe also they're struggling to figure things out and they're 4-8 at the end of the season. Like, I just think that's the thing I want to push back against, just automatically assuming, this is an SEC team. It's going to be the toughest out ever. There'll be some games that will be easier and comparable to other conferences. And I do think you start looking at some of the walkover games too. Now, I think that's probably what has changed the most. And with the investment that's come to a program like Vanderbilt and Kentucky, the way they've raised their level, where you're not walking in as 4 touchdown favorites anymore to many of those.
Right.
You'll still be 10 points. You'll still be 10 point.
And like, just to put my bud hat on and my bud pants for a little bit. I mean, it's a talent acquisition thing. The fact that we're looking at all these programs and they are pulling in rosters that, like, they may be 7-5, but they really might take that same roster into another conference and improve by 2 wins because they do have a level of talent thanks to recruiting in the transfer portal. Like, recruiting, obviously, on the side, like Texas, Oklahoma, recruiting at a high level right now. Ole Miss is more portal based, but they are bringing in really good additions through the transfer portal to be able to beef up that roster with the portal king that is Lane Kiffin. So that's my sense, is that even a Missouri, which is in the bottom half of the conference, undoubtedly, they're recruiting at like a top 25, top 30 level. And that's near the bottom of the SEC. But then in the national perspective, it's still going to be more talent than some of the other programs around the country.
I do wonder how much that might change, though. Like
if you start losing, how long can you get people to come play for you?
Yeah, like
Well,
I
that's
think
the era
Eli's
of NIL where it helps them. Losing, they'll be able to come there because they have deeper pockets. And they're still getting stipends too. Like they still get the most money as well.
Yeah, because I think that's going to be the thing that we see with like the Big Ten and the SEC in this new era is with NIL, with the amount of money that they will be getting compared to other conferences. Like like you were saying with Mizzou, I don't know if a top 30 recruiting class, if you're an SEC or a Big Ten team, is going to mean a damn thing for you. It's probably going to mean you're going 4-8.
It's exciting though, right? I mean, Danny, the pushback is good. Okay, all right, good.
Definitely.
All right, just making sure you're not coming full blaze. Like
no.
DK on fire. Not impressed. All right. But yes, over at CBSSports.com, we've got a full breakdown of everyone's schedule. Barrett Sallee chimed in with some of the biggest takeaways as well. So go and check that out if you haven't gotten a chance to see what the 2024 slate is going to look like for the 16-team SEC.